Hey guys, we have managed to secure the latest phones made by Huawei, the P50 Pro as well as their foldable offering P50 Pocket. Since these devices have been out for a little while and there are already plenty of reviews, we decided to focus this video on the camera performance and we'll be comparing it to the S21 Ultra. Even though we're not covering these devices fully, I do want to remind you that Huawei is still on the US Entity List, which prevents them from trading with US companies. Due to this, there are no Google services installed. So whether or not that makes a difference is for you to decide. Let's get into it. Also, if you're new to this channel, please consider subscribing. First of all, I want to quickly talk about specifications. Back in 2018, Huawei pioneered multiple camera setups with P20 Pro and Mate 20 Pro by making triple camera setups the new norm. It was wildly successful. And in fact, this is one of the main reasons we bought the Mate 20 Pro back then and used it until about a month ago. Since releasing these phones, Huawei has certainly been developing their technology further and even introduced cameras with periscope telephoto lenses. In this latest generation, we have some impressive cameras on the P50 Pro and slightly toned down versions on the Pocket. P50 Pro features 4 cameras, the standard wide which rocks 50 megapixel sensor, ultra wide with 13 megapixel sensor, as well as a 64 megapixel periscope telephoto camera with 3.5 times the optical zoom. To top all of this off, there is a 40 megapixel monochrome wide angle camera that Huawei says can help increase light intake for low light shots. The P50 Pocket has 3 cameras. The 40 megapixel primary wide shooter, same 30 megapixel ultra wide camera, as well as another 32 megapixel wide camera. Samsung S21 Ultra on the other hand has 4 cameras, standard wide, ultra wide, as well as 2 different telephoto lenses. Only the main wide shooter features the high megapixel count, all others are 10 to 12 megapixels. On the front, things change around. Samsung features 40 megapixel shooter while Huawei P50 Pro has 30 megapixels and Pocket has 10.7 megapixels. With the main specs out of the way, let's check out some of the results. All the phones were set to the full screen picture mode and 4K 60 FPS for video recording. The rest of the settings were left in default settings unless specified otherwise. All the examples will be broken down to chapters, so feel free to click around. We'll start with the dynamic range. In this picture of the underpass, all 3 phones seem to be very similar. However, Huawei phones show a bit wider dynamic range. Samsung seems to lighten up the shadows a bit too much, making the whole picture a little too flat. It is even more obvious in this picture with really bright areas around the top part and pretty dark section down below. Both Huawei phones have managed the highlights really well without affecting the foreground and keeping most of the detail. The only downfall is the slightly green tint on the P50 Pro when compared to the others. Next picture is a good example of color and dynamic range. I can confirm the background was very bright as this was shot in the middle of the day. While both Huawei pictures look more accurate, I prefer Samsung's version where the saturation is undeniably increased, but that is making the whole picture more eye-catching. They all have great detail in the foreground and further down in the background too. In this picture, P50 Pocket has clearly lifted the shadows, which reduces the overall contrast and makes the picture look flat, while the other phones are very comparable. S21 Ultra takes a slight edge due to having a bit more saturation in the foreground. It is interesting to see that out of focus blur on the Samsung phone is much more pronounced than Huawei. It is obvious when zooming slightly in looking at the car driving by. Having said that, P50 Pro picture is more accurate to the scenery as we saw it. The last picture in the color topic shows Huawei phones yet again having much more true to life colors, and Samsung has made the world look very vivid. I actually would have liked something in between. If we compare P50 Pro and P50 Pocket, there is also considerable difference. The Pocket is less crisp and the forest across the water has no depth. Next, we check out the macro functionality. I kinda miss more macro specific buttons from the older phones. Nowadays with all 3 phones, you just have to use the standard camera, get close enough to the subject and the camera will automatically change to the macro mode. All 3 phones deliver good amount of detail, with S21 Ultra being more vivid as predicted. When we crop further in, I would actually give the edge to the P50 Pro for capturing more accurate color and slightly more detail. Now moving on to the portrait mode. In this picture, P50 Pro in the middle has by far the best colors, but could do with lifting the shadows. For some reason, both Huawei phones just didn't have any background blur while using portrait mode. We even checked the settings to make sure it's actually set to portrait mode. S21 Ultra does well with the blur around the top part, but went a bit lazy in the details. After some further troubleshooting, we found that the portrait mode works best when the subject is closer to the camera. In this separate example, we start off with the standard mode, where all the phones have managed the shadows fairly well, but S21 Ultra made the whole picture much warmer. We accidentally left the beauty mode enabled on P50 Pro, which is why my face is missing some details. In portrait mode at its default settings, the overall quality is good on all three phones. Samsung is still warmer and has stronger background blur. To match it, we had to enable super blur effect on Huawei, and while it did work making all three pictures similarly blurred, it shows quite a few misfires, especially visible on the post to the right of my head. The issues are big enough to be noticeable, so Huawei needs to work further on this to improve. Of course, let's not forget about selfie mode. Here Huawei has the same issue with the background blur. Samsung picture looks well managed in terms of color and exposure, while P50 Pro has purple tint around my t-shirt. Next up is shooting in the dark. The first picture is taken past sunset in a fairly low light conditions. Samsung's picture more or less represents what we could see with our own eyes, and Huawei picture looks really bright. When we jump into the night mode, it is interesting to see that Huawei pictures didn't change that much. While the scene is brighter on all three phones, it's not by much on the Huawei devices. The greens and blues are noticeably more saturated. I actually prefer P50 Pro picture from before, as it makes it look more dynamic rather than just bright. You may also notice that Samsung's picture is cropped in. This is because at current settings you can't take night mode pictures with ultra wide lens. Huawei P50 Pro is not perfect though. There are some green artifacts at the bottom, and also it's softer than Samsung. The next night mode picture is pretty challenging, as it was really dark. We have very dark and really bright area all in one, so plenty of dynamic range here. Honestly, I would prefer Huawei picture, as the colors are nice, the tree is perfectly lit, and the light on the post is well managed without being blown out. We also took a picture in our studio. The colors on the Huawei are actually more vivid, and the tone is closer to what it looks like in real life. However, P50 Pro as well as Pocket have introduced a lot more noise on the sound panels. Samsung, on the other hand, has applied denoiser, making the panels completely flat, erasing all natural texture on the material. For those who are interested in the zoom functionality, here's a series of shots by the lake. We start off with the ultra wide, where Samsung looks more vivid, with trees nicely separated from the sky, and to top it off, the water looks more see-through and glassy. Continuing with the standard wide camera, also known as 1x zoom, these pictures are more comparable. The amount of detail is very similar, just more vivid results on the S21 Ultra. Now heading into the zoom territory, it is immediately noticeable that all phones have different default focal lengths. S21 Ultra has 3x zoom, Huawei Pocket 2x, and P50 Pro has 3.5x. In this picture, if we crop in, P50 Pro with higher zoom reproduces the sharpest sign to the point where you are actually able to read it. S21 Ultra is a little washed out, and on a Pocket it's just random pixels. In the final picture of the series, we have the 10x zoom, where Pocket is only using digital 5x zoom at this point, hence somewhat pointless results. The other two switch over to that periscope telephoto camera and honestly look very comparable. I'd probably give the slight win to the Huawei for sharpness. One thing for sure, my eyes could not see any of this without using a phone. The last section is going to be video performance, starting with selfie mode. Here we have 3 clips testing video stabilization as well as audio.
The recording on S21 Ultra. It's quick audio and stabilization test. This is a quick recording using P50 Pro, stabilization and audio test. This is a recording on P50 Pocket, a quick audio and stabilization test.
As far as stabilization is concerned, S21 Ultra performs the best here, while P50 Pro feels rather jittery. Also, for some reason the sky gets blown out every few seconds. In terms of audio, it seems Huawei phones have more sensitive microphone as well as processing, so more voices louder and sounds overall good with exception to noise reduction. You can actually hear my footsteps as well as general rustling noises. Next test is video quality and stabilization while using the main camera on the back. Have a look at this clip. Yet again, I find S21 Ultra winning here, as it really reduces the jitters, which in turn makes it less distracting. What is pleasant, both Huawei phones deliver more vivid colors, which is a nice touch. And finally, we have video performance at night. Well, in this video, the main takeaway is that they can all record footage, but it's surely not the kind you could be posting online to show off your picture quality. What else you could expect from a phone after all? If you look at the practical standpoint, S21 Ultra actually lights up the scene with a lot of noise, but at least you can capture some detail, while Huawei is a bit too dark. With this, I'd like to summarize. In the scenarios that we've tested, our opinion is that the latest phones from Huawei can compete in the camera department with the best that Samsung had last year, and overall deliver pretty good results, bearing some issues with video stabilization and portrait mode. This is of course very subjective, and you'll have to judge by yourself which type of picture you prefer the most. Other than that, the camera system delivers really good results and mostly color accurate pictures. I think most of you would prefer a phone that delivers very appealing pictures that you can post directly to social media rather than color accurate pictures, which may need editing. The big thing here is that it's competitive with the last generation of phones, and with the added complexity of no Google services as well as premium price, it makes it a pretty hard sell. If you want to check out any of the items covered in the video, the links are in the description below. I hope you found this useful. Don't forget to smash that thumbs up and subscribe for more. We'll see you guys in the next one.